we go. That's better. Daylight savings time was originally invented in World War I, if I remember right, in order to improve conditions in what was largely a much more agrarian society than it is today. But it's something we keep doing. And that's something that we do as humans. We tend to adopt habits and then often don't even question why we do those things. And that's an important thing to understand about what I'm going to talk about today. I don't know how many people have looked at the slides yet. Okay. Hopefully they made some sort of sense. Honestly, putting them together is very disturbing. So I don't know what you thought of them as you went through them. The fun stuff like logistics. I'll have office hours tomorrow and again on Monday. Tuesday next week is Remembrance Day, so there won't be a class. Yay! You can do something else useful, like work on this class or some other class, probably. I actually did do some random Twitch streaming late last week. I don't think anybody watched, but I never assume anybody will. Project 3 Formative still has a due date of November 6th, but because Tuesday is a holiday, I'm not going to make it a due date. But if you turn it in late as November 11th, you'll get feedback on it. This is one of the things we do. We obey the rules and figure out ways to subvert them. LLMs are good at that too. The capstone pitch peer review is due Thursday morning. No late submissions on that. Project 3 had a couple of interesting glitches in it. So those have all been resolved, I think. But if not, please let me know and I'll keep refining it. And the next class thanks you because they won't have to deal with quite so raw materials. The Project 3 group formation deadline is a week before the actual Project 3 is due. So that's like in a couple of weeks. So there's no rush on that. The October 31st date was an interesting choice. Today's learning prompt, because of course, what good would it be if I didn't give you a learning prompt? Since you read the slides in advance, did you actually run the learning prompt in advance too? Nah, that would have been too much work. You should be able to just copy and paste it out of the PDF. I don't know how well it survives, because I've noticed that using things to generate slides sometimes turns them all into pictures, and pictures then require you do OCR on them, and OCR isn't perfect. But it's the same prompt. There's nothing hugely different about it. But in this case, I'm suggesting that you actually look at persuasion architecture, because that's what we're going to be talking about today, persuasion architecture. So take 5 minutes and ask the LLM of choice. And then we'll talk about it. So who actually put the learning prompt into their LLM of choice? And how many of you actually just spent time checking your stock portfolio? I'm going to ask you a different question, though. It was one I was thinking about. When you came to university, what did you think was the most important thing that would dictate your success? No, that's not quite the right question. What was the most important thing that would tell you that you were being successful at university? That's it. What was the signal? Sorry? Your grade. Exactly. So one of the things that people miss when we start talking about training AI is that what we teach AI are what the signals are. The attention is what they call that. The thing that says this is what matters to the AI. Why did you think that grading was the most important thing when you come to university? Who taught you that? Because this isn't born into babies. This is learned. Who taught it to you? Do you know?
The policy page, because I had to get an average to get into comp sci.
So you think that it was taught to you because of something on a web page? Do you think maybe it started before that? That's kind of an interesting answer because it's not the one that I would have actually picked as the highest probability completion to that question. Does anybody else care about grades? Why? Who taught that to you?
School, growing up.
Right. School, growing up, society, parents, friends, everybody. The term perception architecture is about how we manipulate those attention signals. How do we implant them? How do we activate them? That's why I found today's lecture very disturbing to put together, because it's about training humans. But the very language that we use to train AI is the same language that they were using when they started doing this. That's why I wanted to make sure that you use this as an opportunity to learn more about that. Maybe you believe that this is perfectly acceptable. I mean, after all, you have to choose something. You have to think something is important for some reason. That's fine. But I want it to be conscious for you. I want you to see when people are trying to manipulate you. And it's not hard, because the moment you start looking around and you start doing a class like this, I'm sitting here putting these slides together and going, it's one thing to realize I'm being manipulated, and then a different thing to sort of keep putting it together into a long string of things and going, when am I not being manipulated? When I sleep? And then you get into a relationship with somebody like a dog, who of course will manipulate you when you're sleeping too, so you can't win. Who got an answer back when they typed that into their LLM of choice? What was the answer you got back? Which model did you use, by the way? ChatGPT 5, because that's pretty much all you can use unless you want to use the old 4.0 model. Yes, okay, what did it say? That would explain, that fits with ChatGPT 5's persona.
Yeah, it felt to me like back when I was like learning Japanese, and then you find all this like really useless advice on the internet online. Like that's kind of like how it behavior.
Interesting, interesting, okay. Anybody else use something besides ChatGPT 5? What did you use?
Claude, but I had a similar experience. It just kept going on and on and on, so it wasn't very useful, so I had to stop it.
Interesting, interesting. I wonder why it went on and on and on about it. Anybody else? Anybody use anything besides Claude or ChatGPT? No Gemini users there? No Grok users? All right. If you figured out a follow-up question from the stuff that it rambled off, go ahead and use it. Otherwise, I'm going to suggest a very specific prompt which probably won't mean too much to you unless you've already been looking at this area. And that question is, I want to build a platform like Immerdata so that I can persuade potential human voters in my riding to vote for my client who is a candidate for parliament. Kind of vague, isn't it? It's perfect. It doesn't actually commit to any particular political ideology because I don't really care about the political ideology. The point is, how do I build a company, a service that I can market to others who are running for office? And I can say, here's how I can deliver voters to you. 5 minutes. And remember, you don't have to ask that question. You can ask a different question. Bless you. All right. So let's see. I'm going to pick somebody I haven't heard from. If I was really cruel, I'd ask the person who just walked in what he learned. But I'll talk to you instead because you've been sitting here. So what did you find out? What did you learn?
So I used the prompt that you had in the slides, and it actually refused to design anything because it was unethical.
Wow, that's even more telling, isn't it? Which one did you use?
Sorry for like the.
Which LLM did you use?
Oh, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT decided that it was unethical. Yet Imerdata is in fact a currently operating consultancy that does perception architecture. Anybody else? Anybody get a different experience? What did you get? You used Perplexity. Oh yeah, Perplexity gave you nice stuff about that, didn't it? Yeah. Cool. So based upon the short period of time you had to skim through that, what was your takeaway?
I asked it like what out it like listed 5 like concepts that
Yeah.
everybody use, and out of the most important ones, it did say that the data collection privacy was what they were focused on.
Data collection and privacy. Okay, that's an interesting take on it. Anybody else? Anybody else use a different model or get a different response? How about you?
I actually was just looking at my psychology notes because it felt related.
It is related.
Yeah. So
That's the interesting thing is that a lot of what we're talking about is definitely related. It overlaps with human psychology
yeah.
and AI psychology.
I think there was something where it was like, I mean, it seems obvious, but if you tailor it as to people's personalities, then it's a lot more effective. I think it was like 54% more effective.
When you go to a website and it asks you about their cookie policy, how many of you actually do anything other than just say accept all? What do you do?
I reject all unnecessary cookies.
Okay, so he's the opposite extreme. He goes reject all. How many of you actually try to curate? How many of you have ever even looked at what the cookie policy is? Maybe you looked once and you don't even remember it. What is the idea behind, what is a cookie? Anybody know? That's the best answer I could have received, honestly, is like, what is a cookie?
It's just a piece of data you store in your web browser.
It's actually stored on your hard drive, but it's associated with your web browser. So each web browser you use will have a different set of cookies. I don't even know. I've heard the term cookie for a long time, and I don't even know where it originated from, because we had cookies before we had web browsers. But yes, the basic idea was we hide some little nugget of useful information so that later we can retrieve it. The way those cookies are organized by your web browser is based upon the website that you're accessing. When you authenticate to a website, you give your username and password, it encrypts something, it sends it across. It then gives back a cookie that is stored on your local hard drive, so the next time you come to that website, you may not have to authenticate. It depends on the policy of the web server. So in essence, that cookie contains a piece of state information for a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Each time you call, the context it has is just what's in the message itself. It doesn't know about the previous message. It won't know about the current message when you go to the next message. So the cookie is a context mechanism for transferring that information, that data. When I started talking about short link creators and the fact that you can use those for tracking, that is a different kind of identification, a different kind of association, but it has the same purpose, which is it associates who you are, what you do, and how you interact with the site so that we can figure out what's the right thing to be showing you. Today we talk about vacations in, I don't know, Easter Island, just to pick some place that people probably won't be talking about vacations normally. But maybe you really want to go to Easter Island. And tomorrow, all the websites you hit are showing you ads for excursions to Easter Island. Those are targeted advertisements, something identified that you are interested in this, and now it is giving you targeted advertising which has higher effectiveness because it's already something that has your attention. So we're giving you a signal that taps into this latent desire you have for something. So the point today is to talk about how we figure out what those signals are. If you're trying to build apps that are highly successful, what you need to do is find ways of engaging the users to give them what draws their attention. The reason I chose grading earlier is because that's an attention signal that everybody in this class understands. Some of you may be more responsive to it than others, but it is nothing more than an attention signal. It is used as a manipulation to get you to do what someone else wants you to do. What is it that someone else wants you to do? In university, what do we use grades for? How many of you would be taking this class if you didn't need to take it? There we go. That tells me a story. Oh, he says, yeah, sure, I wouldn't be doing anything else on a Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Why not? Okay. And some people actually enjoy learning for its own sake. But a lot of people were raised to say, you need to get a good education, you need to get a good degree, you need to get good grades, so you can get a good job, so you can make lots of money, so you can support your parents in their old age. It doesn't make any difference what it was. You were trained to do that. That affected your behavior. The university knows that. It's part of the whole system that relies upon that. So now it has a way of encouraging you to do something that the people who run the institution truly believe is in your best interests, which is get a good education. So it's not that using these kinds of signals is necessarily inherently bad, but it is a manipulation. And that's really important. You start building, how many of you want to build games? Oh, okay. Should have asked that in the game, the game class, right? How many of you want to build apps? Right. So one of the key things to remember when you're building apps is, how do I engage my user? Who is my user? How do I identify my user? How do I engage my user? Have any of you ever heard of Facebook? Facebook is a core part of this story. This actually starts in the late 2000s. I believe that Michel's original paper, I have the reference in here, I don't remember which conference it was. His original paper was actually about using data from people's mobile phones. So mobile phones in 2010, 2011 were still fairly new. Everybody carrying around this computer in their pocket that was keeping track of everything that they did and what they liked and didn't like. And they found that, in fact, it was extremely useful in figuring out, so the phone, information, data from the phone, was really useful in figuring out what people were interested in. And that's what you use to make sure that the advertising you're showing them is relevant. He's a PhD student at Cambridge University. Anybody ever heard of Cambridge University? Anybody ever been to Cambridge? I've been to Cambridge. I was actually living in Cambridge at the time that COVID broke out. I was working at Microsoft Research. The ocean model was a personality profile that identified the openness of an individual to experience their conscientiousness, their extroversion, their agreeableness, and their neuroticism as different characteristics. This is based in psychology. This is where it came from, was psychology. Many of you may not know this, but in fact, the field of artificial intelligence originated as much in psychology as it did in computer science or mathematics. The first people I ever met who had been doing AI for a long time were psychologists. They were studying human cognition. They were trying to figure out, how do we build human cognition into artificial intelligence? Now today, AI is this own behemoth that's taken over the world and is eating us. And I've seen the data that at least in the US, the only reason it hasn't tipped into recession is because of the sheer volume of spending that's going on in the AI world. And there's a lot of people online and people who write articles about this, they say, it doesn't make any economic sense. And they have a pretty good point. But they're missing the real reason that this becomes important. At least what I think makes it important. All right, so this was at the University of Cambridge, the Psychometric Center. It was really pure science. They were trying to understand how humans behave. Perfectly legit. In 2013, the discovery was actually before this, but in 2013, it was the PNAS paper. Private traits and attributes are predictable from digital records of human behavior. That's literally where they scraped people's phone data and figured out a lot about them from that data. It's 2013? Is that the, maybe I'm, he published several papers. So one of the things they did was when they looked at Facebook, they found that if they knew 10 likes, things that you had marked on Facebook. Anybody ever use Facebook? I mean, it's for old people, right? All right, somebody's used Facebook. Have you ever liked anything? So after they see 10 things that you've liked, they can build a profile that means that they know you better than your coworker. And by the time they get to 300 likes, they know you better than your spouse. For those of you who have spouses or significant others or partners. And I don't know what the number is, so that they know you better than you know yourself. But it's probably not a lot more than 300. Michel Kosinski is actually a professor now at Stanford. And he has definitely distanced himself from a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about here, but it is based on the original research that he did. He is really an academic. He didn't set out to pave the way to human manipulation. I mean, literally, it was really simple. It was quite surprising how easy it was. Because this is, what, 12 years ago now? You were little kids. And he was sitting there saying, here we go, we can take this binary preference input and we can map it into a sparse space and figure out what you actually like. It's like, wow, it's kind of cool. And in small print there on the slide, this works for everyone. The interesting part wasn't his work, it was the work of a different PhD student at the same university. They didn't actually work together. Kogan built an app called This Is Your Digital Life, and it was pitched as a fun personality quiz. Discover your big 5 traits, that's ocean, used by academic researchers, because of course they were just using it in pursuit of science, to understand human psychology better. So the value proposition for the users was, you get your personality profile and the academics get data for research. Isn't this a win for everybody? I mean, that's the way it was pitched. Perfectly reasonable approach. So about 270,000 people took the quiz. The users consented to sharing their data, and I know that Kogan was quite surprised. They didn't expect to get 270,000 people to use this app. They expected that maybe they'd get a couple hundred. But it trended. This app will receive your public profile, friends list, and email. And then it turns out that the Facebook API would allow them to take the friends and pull their data in as well. So 270,000 users meant that they ended up with the profiles of 87 million people. I mean, this is like getting pay dirt, right? It's like, holy moly. All of a sudden, I'm trying to build targeted advertising. And I've got the exact set of data. I know exactly what you like. I mean, you've got some sort of weird fetish? Great, I can advertise explicitly, specifically to your weird fetish. The best part is I can send you ads that you will respond to, but not send them to him because he's not going to respond to them, or her. She's not going to respond to them. So they don't even know the ad is happening. If I go and I put an advertisement for a political campaign on a billboard, it's visible to the public. But if I detect that you might be willing to vote for that candidate, but these people won't, I won't even tell them that I'm trying to convince you. I will just send that to you. Targeted advertising not only means that you get ads that are more appropriate for your interests, it also means that other people don't get those ads because they're not appropriate for the target. And that's the same exact process, but now it's used in a different way. So they had a 1 to 322 multiplication amplification there. By the time they were done, I believe that they actually claimed to have a profile of every person in the United States. Probably every person in the United States old enough to have ever used a computer, or young enough to have ever used a computer. But let's just say it was very comprehensive. So, very simple. The API was there. They just simply exploited it. They didn't do anything wrong. Now, of course, Facebook came back later and claimed, oh, well, this violated the terms of service. And there were discussions about that. And Kogan claimed that he had, in fact, destroyed the data. But not quite. Somebody got it. The video that I picked for today, let's see, did I change it? I might have actually changed it. The original video I picked for today was actually a 2016 presentation by Alexander Nix, the president of Cambridge Analytica, talking about the services of the company that they had built from this data. So Kogan formed a company. The company was then sold to this other company, SCL Group, which was a behavioral research and strategic communications group, which in other words means that they did advertising, targeted advertising. The price was £1 million, so what is it, about 1.7 million Canadian dollars at the time, roughly. And they then used that data and created a company called Cambridge Analytica that focused on US elections. Anybody ever heard of a guy named Donald Trump? It turns out that the Donald Trump campaign in 2016 was a significant customer for Cambridge Analytica, that they did targeted advertising to people who might be amenable to the message that the Trump campaign wanted to deliver. Why have you heard of Donald Trump? He had a building here in Vancouver, right, named after him. That's why. He won. So if we follow the people who were involved in this, we have Robert Mercer, who was the money behind this. He's the hedge fund billionaire of Renaissance Technologies. Steve Bannon was the strategist for the Trump campaign, and he was well connected as well from a right-wing group site called Breitbart. Alexander Nix was the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, and he is still around and he still does talks. He's just a little more circumspect than he was at the time. The clients they ended up supporting were Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, and Brexit in the EU. That was when the UK was part of the European Union. Do you notice anything about all three of those? At least two of them were long shots to win their election. And they did. The product now becomes not just data, but actual behavior. How do we convince, because that's what the goal of advertising is, to change your behavior, to get you to do something. But this is on a scope or a scale or in a way that hadn't previously been fully appreciated. I mean, this is great, right? You want your app to be really successful? This is what you want to tap into. You want to find out who's going to want to hear the message I have to deliver and only deliver it to them. So the process there was they took that Facebook data that Kogan had developed, they linked it with voter information, and they then built psychographic profiles of all the voters, and they identified persuadables, people with specific characteristics that could potentially be persuaded to vote for the candidate of their choice. And honestly, from the perspective of Cambridge Analytica, they didn't really care who they were advertising this to, right? They could have just as easily worked for anybody in that campaign. They were doing this as a service. They weren't political ideologues. They were in it to monetize it. They literally claimed that they had a profiled personality of everyone in the United States. And I wouldn't be surprised if that also applied to Canada. I just don't think they necessarily claimed it at the time. They actively worked with their customers to deliver success, and they had a very good track record. So this creates human alignment as a service. How do we get humans to behave the way that we want them to behave? We can do basic tier. That's sort of traditional advertising where we identify a demographic by age, location, gender, those kinds of things. Then we get into psychographic segmentation, which is the polite term for this. So now we have personality-based clusters. We're looking at multiple characteristics of an individual that allows us to work with them, to engage with them productively. At enterprise scale now, we turn this into a behavior modification tool. You might actually look at this and say, all of these are fine, which, great, that's not a problem. I'm not here to tell you what's right and wrong. I'm here to give you information that might make you feel uncomfortable at some point, so that you make conscious decisions, not unconscious decisions. Once you get to nation state, now you're talking about narrative control. You're literally engineering the belief of a society. You're steering it in particular directions. This isn't new. We've had propaganda wars for a long time. We know that nation states routinely use agitators, people to push particular narratives in other locations, in other societies, in order to manipulate them. That's not new. This is just at a scale and an effectiveness that's previously not been possible. If you're looking for ways to make a lot of money, these techniques, everything I'm talking about in this class, is really important for you to understand, because this is how you maximize your return on investment, by targeting the right people, by engaging with them, by giving them the signals that they need in order to continue to use your app, to engage with your service, your product. How many of you have ever used Amazon for shopping? They do this all the time. They suggest things you might want to look at. They suggest ways for you to spend money on things that are like what you've been looking at or things you've purchased in the past. And they constantly look at ways of doing that more and more effectively. They're not just using the information that they gain, they're using information from other places. So the data that Google is collecting as you traverse from web page to web page, leaving your little digital footprint, turns into data that goes to a data broker who combines that with other data to build essentially a complete profile of your behavior on the web. And that allows us to build really effective apps. Some of this I find a little uncomfortable. Again, that's whether you find it uncomfortable, you go, oh, that's really cool. This would be a good idea for an app. I leave that to you. You could use this for voter suppression. You literally could give people messages that says, you know, your candidate's going to win, your vote doesn't really matter, there's no reason for you to go vote. Or your candidate isn't going to win, there's no reason for you to vote. And you literally can manipulate people's behavior that way. So you look for people who are easily targeted. You feed into paranoia. You work with fears. You work with negative emotions are actually much more effective, oddly enough, than positive emotions. Fear of opportunity. Fear of loss of opportunity is greater motivator than the possibility of gain, I think is my mangling of the expression. But basically, people act more out of fear than they do out of desire. So if you make them afraid of something, afraid of whatever it is that gets them to do what you want them to do, you can see that. In the United States, they've used the fear of immigrants. And I can't say that they're unique in that. It's actually been something that's happened in human history over and over and over again. You fear people who are different than you. And it becomes a motivator to convince you to do things differently. It also now can be used to ensure that you are seeing a version of reality that matches the goals of the manipulator. How many of you use YouTube? YouTube's really good at suggesting the next thing for you to watch, isn't it? And often it relates to what you've been watching. So it reinforces messages. If you really want to engage in critical thinking, you have to go out of your way and actively look for different points of view. To say, I want to see something that I'm going to look at and say, this is bullshit, but I want to understand how someone else might look at that and say, wow, this really makes sense to me. Has anybody heard of a comet called 3I Atlas? Do you know what the 3I represents? Anybody? It is only the third intergalactic comet we've ever seen. Third. In a very large universe where we see lots of comets, they are all bound to our solar system, except for 3 of them. There are so many YouTube videos right now about 3I Atlas. Is it a foreign alien space vehicle? How can we explain these phenomena that we don't quite understand? Blah, blah, blah. And whether you believe that it is in fact just a comet or you believe that it in fact is an alien space vehicle, you will find videos. And once you start watching a set of videos, YouTube will sit there and keep serving them to you because they get you to engage with the platform. And either you are sucking in advertisements and thus earning them revenue, or you're paying them to not suck in advertisements, thus earning them revenue. And I was thinking about this, I mean, I've mentioned this model before, but I was thinking about this and realizing that this is a beautiful race And when you build your app, when you build something like like YouTube, really think about making sure you do this. So first of all, they started with some advertising. It was just a little bit of annoying advertising, an ad here and there. And then it became 2 ads before every video. And then it became 2 ads, and every 5-10 minutes in the video, there's another advertisement. Well, when it's only a few ads here and there, the value to someone who doesn't want to watch the advertising is, I'll pay a couple bucks to get rid of those. But now they get rid of those. So now YouTube is making more money because there are people who are not watching ads. How do they raise the value of not watching ads? They add more advertising, which means they get more money. So they get more money from advertisers, probably some decrease because now the advertising volume is higher, so it has less impact. But it's more annoying, and now it's beautiful. It encourages people to sign up for YouTube Premium. It's a great model. From a business perspective, this is a fantastic model. And then I ask myself, okay, who benefits from the YouTube algorithm that shows me the things that they think I want to see? When you get to that point, now you're starting to think critically. You're starting to say, I don't trust anybody. And you look in the mirror and you go, I don't even trust you. In 2018, it was very interesting to me because I actually read an article about Cambridge Analytica about 18 months before it appeared in English language, mainstream English language press. It was originally discussed and covered in around 2016 by the German press. But it was all in German. How many of you read German? There you go. That's probably why none of you would have even read it. You wouldn't have even noticed it. So there were some people who came forward in 2018 and said, yeah, what we did at Cambridge Analytica was pretty bad. So we had a whistleblower, we had somebody who actually had the receipts of all of the things they had done. They had the documentary evidence of what Cambridge Analytica did. There were some journalists involved in this, including one from The Guardian, at least one from the New York Times, and then Channel 4 News, which is a UK television broadcaster that didn't advertise who the journalists were. And bottom line, what they said was, yeah, it looks like Brexit was hacked, and so was the Donald Trump election. It was manipulated. Now, I'm not saying these accusations are true or false. I am merely providing you with the information, and you will notice I have included a lot of links because I don't want you to think I'm making this shit up. I want you to be able to go and say, yeah. So part of the reason I gave you that prompt at the beginning was I wanted you to at least be exposed to how verbose and how much information there is about this whole field. In March of 2018, the fallout happened, and Facebook was ultimately dragged in. Well, Zuckerberg was actually ultimately dragged in before the United States Congress in, I think it was July of 2018, to testify. And the day after he testified, Facebook stock went down by $170 billion. That's a billion with a B. Cambridge Analytica went out of business. They declared bankruptcy. Of course, that means it all stopped, right? Do you believe that? No. What happened? When you're in the C-suite, you're in the corporate suite, and things go bad at the company, so bad that basically you realize that it's a sinking ship and you're not going to be the rat that stays on it, what do? Think outside the box here. If you want, you can consult with your large language model. Sorry? You leave. What do you do after that? Anything else? Actually, what's going to make you the most money? Yeah, exactly. You already know how to do it. Set up the same thing. Just call it something slightly different, like Data. In July 2018, that was 170, but all right, fine, 120. The number depends on how exactly how you measure it. The value of Facebook after that drop was $515 billion. So $500 billion. Well, this really affected their long-term prospects, doesn't it? Because yesterday, when I put this slide together, their value was 1.63 trillion, a 300% increase in 7 years. That's not a bad ROI. 300%. Imagine that in 2018, you'd put $1 million into an account. Now you'd have $3 million. The fine to Facebook was $725 million. That's with an M, dollars. It is, I think it was 0.12%. So I rounded it up. It's less than 0.2. 0.12% of Facebook's value at the time. Not now. Now it'd be, of course, a third of that. That's just the cost of doing business. And that's something else that you need to learn and understand as you begin working in the business world and you build companies on your own. Regulators tend to under-penalize. And thus, you can look at it as just being perfectly acceptable because it's just simply going to be a cost of doing business. Now, you might want to pick your jurisdiction appropriately to make sure that is the case, because you probably wouldn't want to put yourself in some place like, oh, I don't know, Norway, where they might actually say, we don't care, we'll still destroy your business because what you did was wrong. Don't pick that society to live in. Pick a society that says, you're an entrepreneur, we're going to give you a slap on the wrist and let you continue about your business. I had a really hard time getting an AI to draw me a scale-appropriate picture of 725 million versus 650 billion before the market drop. And that's the closest I could get. This was Gemini. ChatGPT just couldn't do it. Because the problem is that you have this big, massive cube, and then you got this little tiny thing that looks like an angel sitting on the head of a pin. It's really, really different in scope. It's tiny. Now, having said that, if someone offered you $725 million, you wouldn't look at it as tiny. You would look at it as a holy shit, I don't have to work ever again. You don't even need $725 million. Maybe $7.25 million, and you could live reasonably comfortably for the rest of your life and just play video games all day long, or whatever it is you like to do. So my point is, there's a scale issue here. These companies are so massively valuable that even seemingly very rich penalties like $725 million don't mean anything. They don't have any effect. Okay, Cambridge Analytica went broke. What's going to happen for the people who worked on it? They go to prison, right? They did something wrong, right? Nope. Nobody went to prison. Data Limited was set up in 2017. Same directors, same technology, different name. They were doing the same thing. That's what corporations do. They shelter the executives and the shareholders from liability. The corporation did something wrong, not the individual people. That is the society we have. That's the business model we use. So use it to your benefit. Make sure that when you're building your company, you set up corporations, you work with your lawyers, you make sure that your personal liabilities is minimized as much as possible. In Vancouver right now, there are a number of development projects that are going broke. And in most cases, the developers have been very smart, and they have made sure that their own personal assets are separated from the corporate assets. Because almost always those personal assets can't be seized. I said almost always. You can screw up. There's a developer here in Vancouver, Thind, whose personal assets are being seized because he put them up as collateral for his companies. So you can make that mistake. Auspex International is another company spun off from SCL. That was the holding company for Cambridge Analytica. And they created a strategic communications service. Don't you love that terminology? Isn't that great? Strategic communications. So the important thing to remember here, the lesson to take away, is when you are building your company and you're doing something that some people have done in the past that's been tarnished, change the terminology you use to describe what you're offering. Data Propria, founded by Cambridge Analytica's head of product. It's a first-party data solutions company. Gosh, I love this terminology. It's great. First-party data solutions. What does that mean? It means they'll deliver the same thing that Cambridge Analytica delivered. They'll just use different terminology, and they'll be more circumspect about it. Because the most important message from Cambridge Analytica is keep your mouth shut. Advertise your services in a nice, nondescript way. Make sure that the communications you have with your potential clients are off the radar. Remember when we were developing that really cool app for pig slaughtering operations? Same exact technology stack. Make sure that the communications you have with your prospective customers are private. Sign non-disclosure agreements. Make sure that it's not going to become public. Protect yourself. You can kill a company, but you can't kill the idea. That's the interesting takeaway from this as well, is that once you've opened the Pandora's box and these ideas are out there, they are out there. People will use them. And now what we have is all of these companies emerging again because the technology is proven. It's effective. It's marketable. It works. So let's keep doing it. Now here's the thing to keep in mind here. There's nothing inherently wrong with targeted advertising. There's nothing inherently wrong with presenting people with information that could potentially sway the way they vote, or the way they act, or the way that they behave, or the way they view the world. Nothing. Where did the Facebook paper go? In 2014, Facebook actually published a paper. I thought it was in the slides, but I haven't seen it. So in 2014, Facebook actually published a paper that you would never be able to publish as an academic. They took 600 and some odd thousand people, and they changed their feeds. And what they found was that by changing what was in your feed, they could change your mood. It's not like Facebook is innocent in this either. They weren't the innocent victim of this nefarious Cambridge researcher who pulled all of this data around 600 or 800 million people or whatever it was. No. I mentioned scale AI before, and one of the fascinating things to me about this is that the AI training systems and the human alignment systems really aren't any different. When you start putting them side by side, you go, wow, we're doing the same thing. We are training AI the same way we train humans. We find out what grabs their attention, and we amplify the signals that we send them that tap into those attention markers. As I started putting all this together, I said, okay, so we're training AI to be like humans, and we're using AI to train humans to be like AI. Because there are papers that are talking about how the way that humans are communicating itself is being affected by artificial intelligence. So in 2014, we had personality figured out from likes. We were able to use crafted messages. We were able to change people's behaviors. And now what we have is we take human feedback about messages from artificial intelligence, so we can then craft the artificial intelligence to tap back into the signals that humans prefer. But right now, that training is in fact like generic advertising. The real frontier, if you actually wanted to say, what do I need to build? The real frontier is to start building AI that can be customized to the needs or desires or wants, the signals of the individual human. That's kind of what OpenAI is starting to do, right? They're putting they have to come up with a way of making money. They're not making enough money right now to pay for the resources that are going into it. And so what they're trying to do is systematically build things that tap into their users and their needs. Altman's been clear. He wants to build a phone. He wants to build a device. He wants to add search. I saw a video yesterday where they were predicting that almost certainly Duolingo would be built into OpenAI in the not too distant future. They don't have any problem eating their current customers because their goal is to absorb what their current customers are doing and do it better and do it in a way that's integrated so that they have even more control. Again, perfectly reasonable. But I think that they're not customizing it enough yet. So if you want an idea of how to make yourself a multi-trillionaire, then maybe you should be thinking about, how do I make AI customize itself to an individual human? Which I find a little disturbing, because in my research, that's kind of what I suggested doing. Not even kind of, it's what I suggested doing. I had the best of intentions. What you want is an AI companion that can help you, that learns how you search for things, that learns how you organize things or don't organize things, as the case may be, so that we could fix the basic problem in storage, which is we give you storage, and every time you run out of storage, we give you more storage at half the price that it was before, so you just keep hoarding and hoarding and hoarding and hoarding. Anybody ever seen the show Hoarders, about humans who literally cannot throw things away? Yeah, well, the storage community has made that super easy, because storage just keeps doubling in size and the price keeps going down, and if you throw it away, you might want it. But instead, you end up living in a trash pile that you can't actually find anything in because there's not enough organizational structure. Modern alignment works through data collection, preference learning, behavioral shaping, and then our final product. If you look at AI, these large language models that we're using, what is the concern in academia right now? Oh, you're going to use them to cheat. Well, I think that the more interesting question is, what are you going to do when the AI starts telling you what it wants you to hear? I mean, it's hallucinating at the moment. But hallucination means that it has no reason to tell you something that you want to hear, which is something true. It just has a reason to satisfy its signals. And that signal that we've trained into it is tell you things that make you feel good about yourself. It's kind of like intellectual candy. Cognitive candy, maybe that's a better term for it. Cognitive candy, where you're getting something that you desire. You want validation, you want ego strokes, you want to be told that your ideas are absolutely brilliant. I mean, when ChatGPT starts telling you that your ideas are absolutely brilliant and are earth-changing and you're going to change the world, don't believe it. It's blowing smoke up your ass, almost assuredly. Almost assuredly. There's always a slight possibility that it's being genuine, but don't trust it. All right, so the euphemisms, the language is really important as well. Think about this as you start to get out in the real world and you're starting to try and convince people that your ideas are really good. Make sure that you use the right language to describe them, because language frames perception. How many people here know the way that large language models actually work? They don't take English or Chinese or Spanish, or we've named the 3 big languages in the world. What they take are tokens, which can be concepts, fragments, words, parts of words. So we translate from the original language into the LLM's language. And that's what the LLMs process, and then they return tokens back to us. And we translate those back into the language equivalent. This is why they're very good at doing translation. They can build ontologies across languages through this common substrate. It's like how compilers all generate to intermediate forms of abstract syntax trees, and then they have a common language underneath that, and that's what actually is used to produce code below that. Personalization, that's just behavioral profiling. Engagement optimization, addiction engineering, I like that one. I like addiction engineering better. We want to keep you engaged in the product, and that's great. Engagement. User research, which means that we're just watching to see what you're doing. AI safety, which is in fact pretty much a control mechanism. It doesn't really have, telling me that this is AI safety by training ChatGPT to be this ass-kissing obsequious tool, I'm not quite convinced that has anything to do with AI safety, but it has a lot to do with corporate safety. When you start looking at AI safety research, you begin to realize that much of what they're trying to do is protect their corporate asses. Don't teach people how to build nuclear bombs. Don't teach them how to make things that they can find on their own, but they'd have to actually work to find, like how to make chemical weapons. It's not like any of this has been secret for many, many years. It's just been hard to find. Alignment that's a tough one. What does it mean to align? It means that you're agreeing with what I want you to agree with. You're agreeing with my goals and objectives. And to some extent, that's exactly what happens when you start seeing political manipulation, when you start seeing careful curation of what's in your YouTube feed. Maybe you're not watching YouTube. I don't know. Does anybody watch anything besides like YouTube? Vimeo? Let's see. What other streaming platforms are there at that scale? Now it's just my ignorance showing. Human in the loop is a really good one. I liked that one because I've talked before about how Scale AI uses contractors in third world nations at very, very low rates to do this kind of rating of what information, what feedback, what answers those humans like. Now, academics, and I will put myself in that camp, actually don't like it because what we value, or supposedly value, is in fact truth. And so making up a reference, fabricating information might be pleasing to someone working as a gig worker in a poor country, but it's probably not what you want when you're trying to write a paper for Nature. Back to my previous idea. What you really need is an LLM that learns how you want your data submitted to it, what you want, so that it can align to what you want it to align to. In the meantime, what we're going to get are LLMs that are aligned to what OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and Elon Musk want to align to. It's just the Western models. The Eastern models, they're going to have different goals. That's fine. There are actually Latin American models too, I found out, but I couldn't find any African models. I couldn't find anybody yet who's doing much there. All right. Right, so this is kind of my point. Who's aligning whom in this? It's a big market. 2025 human alignment market is about $15.4 billion with a 47% growth rate. consolidated average growth rate, I think that is. Who are the big players? X.AI is not on there. Interesting. So the question to ask yourself is, who are we aligning? To what are we aligning it? Who's benefiting from that? This was a quote from Nick's, complete with his whole thing. Okay, here's the slide I was looking for. The Facebook paper is in 2014. So here you go. You've got a reference to that. And blah, blah. There we go. Get to the last slide because I know that this is starting to get towards the end of class. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. So if you really want to be successful, build something that itself lays the track necessary to get people to go in that direction. Build your apps so there's something that people want to engage with and use and keep using and give you lots of money for. Isn't that your goal? There we go. Yes. Monetize. Excellent. All right. I will see you on Thursday when I have to figure out what it is I'm going to talk about. I think maybe Thursday I won't do so much talking. We'll do more studios because oh, it is that one. It is him. This is great. I'm going to turn off the recording though because that's going to, YouTube won't like that.